Hello everyone. Thank you for joining us today for Indium Software's webinar on how data assurance is the secret sauce behind data-driven decisions. A quick introduction about Indium Software. We're a digital engineering company that builds modern solutions across applications, data, and gaming. We're present in 4 countries: North America, India, United Kingdom, and Singapore. Indium Software has helped global enterprises build real-time analytic solutions and ensure that the cleanest data was available for key business decisions. We offer a wealth of experience across industries such as banking, healthcare, and manufacturing. In our exclusive webinar today, we'll uncover the secret sauce behind data driven decisions: data assurance. We have a distinguished speaker, Arunachalam Shankaralingam, Vice President of Digital Assurance at Indium Software. He's here to guide us through this exciting journey. Together, we'll explore comprehensive data assurance in cloud migration, strategies for evolving data architectures, the power of automation, and Indium's exclusive data assurance framework, IDAF. There's an exclusive 15-minute Q&A at the end of the session where you can post your questions and Arun will address them. So without further ado, Arun, the virtual stage is yours.
Thanks. Thank you, Abhi. Hey, good afternoon and good evening to all the attendees who have joined today from across the globe for this webinar. In my 20 plus years of experience working across airline, banking, healthcare, and capital market domain, predominantly on the data space, have come across multiple challenges, right, in the data and analytics validation. And today I'm here to share my perspective, the approaches, and how we can automate under the topic data assurance, the secret sauce behind data-driven decisions. Right. So let's get into the presentation. In the hyper-connected world, we see a lot of data that gets generated. Right. When we talk about data in a typical day, we see 295 billions of emails that are being sent, more than 500 millions of tweets that are getting generated. Right. And in the connected cars, we see more than 4 terabytes of data. All this, right, we see a lot of media, right, videos, images that are getting posted. So there's a tons of data that is getting generated, and with the advent of IoT, we see lot of wearables, sensor data that is getting generated, and the volume that we look at is in a day there are 28 petabyte of data that is getting generated from wearables, right? And the data is growing, and according to analyst survey, what we have seen is the data which was roughly about 4.4 ZBs in 2013 had grown to more than 44 ZB in 2020, and it is projected to grow to 175 ZB by 2025. Right. To put the perspective of this data, the volume that we are talking about it, if we were to copy this amount of data that is going to be generated into a Blu-ray and then store it, right? So there will be 23 stacks between Earth and Moon, right? That's the volume of data that we are talking about, right? So with this humongous volume that is getting generated, right, how it is put to use, how businesses are interested in using this data, right? That's something that we are going to look at. So predominantly enterprises are looking at leveraging the data, which is the new gold, right? We have large volumes of data that is residing, and people want to make use of this data. They want to manage the collected data, ensure that the security of the data is of importance, and then cutting away all the silos that is getting generated from multiple data sources, bringing in all together, and then making decisions based on that, right? That's the objective of the businesses, right? When I talk about businesses or enterprises, we are seeing this across industries, right? Be it healthcare, insurance, retail, across industries, we see relevance for data and making insights from the data that is present with them, right? So what we see is customers are building data warehouses, right? And they want to consume this data from data warehouses. They want to use this data. They want to modernize, use this data, and have analytics on top of this, right? So there are multiple tech stacks that are available in the industry, and people are interested in building analytics and making business decisions out of this, right? And as part of this process, they do have challenges in terms of heterogeneous data sources from which they consume this data, right? So in the subsequent 15 minutes, we are talking about the various use cases that the business teams have, right? So it could be across domains again. This could be relevant. And what are the validations that needs to be done on top of these data implementations to make sure that the data quality is intact, data completeness is there, data integrity is maintained, right? That's part of the data validation exercise. And we want to ensure that these aspects are taken care across different use cases so that the business can make business decisions with confidence, right? That's the whole objective. And as we speak, there are varied technologies. There is a lot of cloud providers that are evolving. There are a lot of SaaS products that are evolving, who give enterprises the ability to consume the data at scale, the volume at which it is getting generated. They are getting many more options, right? So we are going to see how we are going to validate it, right? So when I say validate it could be for a varied use cases. The one could be, say, for example, data warehouse implementations, right? The data warehouse has evolved as well, right? The typical data warehouse that we saw was more of structured data coming in from sources, stored in file systems, getting processed, stored into a data warehouse, and then consumed as BI reports, right? This is what was typically happening, right? But then with the evolution, what we see is we saw data lake, right? Typically from ETL, enterprises started adopting ELT model, right? Consume all the data into the lake, and then as needed, pick up the data, transform, analyze, and then use it, give it for the usage of the community, right? So this is something that had evolved, right? So as part of this journey, what we see is data lakes has become data lake houses, and now we see data mesh, which is more decentralized. The earlier we saw the architecture more focused. Now we have decentralized approaches coming in. So people who were more of having end of day batch process and then evaluating that data, we started evolving into ad hoc analysis basis. We had real-time data ingestion coming in. Now we have event-based ingestions coming in. With all of these, there comes the complexity of, or the testing complexities, right? The complexity of ensuring that the data that gets processed, right, as it goes through this journey, it's validated and the data quality is intact, right? That's the whole objective. So we will now see the use cases and how each of these use cases need to be approached from the data validation aspect. And then we will transition into how this whole approaches needs to be applied, how we can introduce automation into it, and how we have leveraged that within Indium also. Yeah. So coming to data warehouse, right? As we saw earlier, there are heterogeneous data sources from which the data comes in, right? So we have CRM systems, we have the third-party upstream systems from which we could get data in JSON, XML, flat files, and there are a lot of unstructured data that reside, right? So as part of data warehouse, data lake, we want to ensure that the data that is coming in from these systems gets processed as it goes through each layer, through ODS, staging, warehouse, marts, and reports. We ensure that the data integrity is maintained as the data goes through, and there is no data loss aspects, right? So it is important for the testing or the validation group to test data as it goes through each layer, rather than taking the dashboard outputs and then comparing with the source. We want to introduce testing at each layer so that you can identify failures before it gets propagated to subsequent stages. Right? So here, the key testing that needs to be performed are ensuring that the records from the source have made it to the ODS and the record count matches, and the metadata that we expect is intact, is according to the mapping. And as part of this journey, if there is a archival purge requirement, making sure the data is archived post its usage timeline, and if there is a data to be purged, it is purged, and if it is to be stored, it is stored. And as part of data warehouse, typically what we see is initial load and then incremental load, right? So ensuring that the initial load of the data is successful, and post initial load, based on the type of SCD that is implemented, the incremental load validation, right? Making sure the new data that gets generated, the existing data which were modified, and the data which has to be deleted, right, or deleted, right? So ensuring the data transformations and completeness are the key focus areas in a typical data warehouse implementation that we need to be aware of and taken care of, right? If we extend this, right, into a cloud transformation or a data mesh implementation, right, we see a lot of enterprises now moving away from standard data warehouses into cloud data warehouse, right? Be it on Azure, AWS, Oracle Cloud, GCP, right? Or even app modernization for that aspect, right? When a particular app gets modernized, its underlying data, right, either it gets moved, it also gets transformed, or it also gets processed and stored into from on-premise into these cloud data warehouses, right? And we see a lot more testing needs in cloud migration, cloud transformation, and app modernization initiatives, right? So as they move from on-premise to a cloud infrastructure, the business teams wants to ensure that the data that gets moved from on-premise to cloud infrastructure doesn't have any data loss, right? That's the paramount importance. And any reports that gets generated, any downstream information that gets processed out of these, and all the workflows that are existing and the upstream systems which gets integrated, all of these aspects needs to be validated, right? So all the external data sources which gets integrated, we need to ensure that post migration we are able to integrate and then do the validation, right? It is intact. That's the key objective. And once that part is validated, we make sure that all the external data sources are processed, right? Then the key aspect is the data, which could be end of day batch processing or direct processing, real-time processing, right? In any of these, the key imperative for the testing team is to ensure that there is no data loss. So again, the key aspect for them would be to verify the count between these sources from which we source these data is processed and there is no data loss as it gets stored, right? And the type of validations that we need to focus upon in such a large initiative is three things, right? One, ensuring the historical data that resides on premise is successfully migrated into our cloud platform. And post migration, all the data that is residing now, with that data, we are able to run analytics. And are we able to ingest new data, right, that is getting generated from the upstream system? It gets processed and stored into the data warehouse. And then the real-time batch downstream, which information which is consumed by the end users, right, that gets validated. So these are the key aspects that we need to look at from a cloud transformation and a app modernization perspective, right? So now that we have looked at typical data warehouse and data lake or a mesh and cloud transformation initiative and the types of validations that needs to be done on that space, the other aspect that we need to look at is the BA or the reports as our data visualization testing, right? We spoke about a lot of data and the decisions that being taken on top of the data that is processed, stored, and analytics models that get built out, right? So the all of these are getting done because the business users, they want to get insights out of the reports, right? So when they make those business decisions, they need to be sure that they have the right data, right? If there is a summarization involved, the data is summarized properly. If there are aggregations done, the aggregations are done properly. If there are any dimensional aspects at any dimension level, when they look at the data, it makes sense and it has the right data, right? That's the key aspect that needs to be looked into. So other than the data itself, as a business user, we want to ensure they are able to easily access these reports. The report structure is as expected. The performance testing of these reports, ensuring that the reports are generated within the SLAs defined, right? It could be 3 seconds, it could be 5 seconds, 10 seconds, whatever be the time frame. We need to ensure that that aspect is taken care of as well. And data accuracy aspect, right? Ensuring the value that is present in the dashboards, in the data marts, that is the data that is present in the reports, right? That's something that we need to be able to validate. And then drill down, right? Most of the visualization layers or the dashboards gives the users the ability to drill down, right? From summary level, let's say from a region level, when are they able to drill down and see at a country level, at a state level, city level, at a unit level, right? Any type of drill down and be able to get the actual value that against that, right? That's another key aspect that we need to test. And then comes the ability to export the data, ensure that the data that is present behind the reports, they are able to test that. That's the other aspect that we need to take care. Right? So now that we have looked at data warehouses, data mesh, and the data visualization part, the other most happening space is the analytics space, right? So this is where we see lot of businesses, right? Small, medium, large enterprises, everybody, especially with Gen AI evolution, there are more and more traction in terms of building analytical models, using these data, making business decisions out of this, right? So when we implement these analytics on top of ML models, it is important that we look at the data aspect, right? So when we talk about data aspect, ML model is built upon the quality of the data that with which it is trained, right? So it is important for us to make sure that the data that we use for training the models, right, it should be in line with what we see, or it should be representative of the online data that we see, right? So maintaining high quality ML models, right, by monitoring data and ensuring its quality is high, helps us in getting the model outcomes, right? Better outcomes, right? Better predictability, better accuracy, right? So if we need all of this, we need to ensure that the data quality is in test. We need to be able to do tests like null checks, right? Ensuring when there are nulls that are coming in as part of the data, is it creating a drift in the overall model? Does it affect the outcome of the model, right? Ensuring foreign key checks, ensuring when there is a numeric column, when we change the data in those numeric columns, does that drastically impact our model, right? And if there are some specific categorical or a dimension based monitoring, right, that we need to perform on top of the data to make sure we are able to detect any changes, right? We read across some time back, I read across a use case where a particular business, right, in terms of determining their fare, they were using multiple parameters. And as part of the data model, one of their upstream system has changed the logic for a specific feature, which resulted in the incoming data, right, as having some new values in a specific fare. So what had happened was this change, right, resulted in a slight drift of the way in which they were charged, right? So this resulted in 0.23% of deviation, right, in terms of the gross rates that they charge from the customers, right? So which means in a typical revenue, they were losing out 0.23% in a day, right? And the data scientists, when they were doing the analysis manually, they found this almost 45 days later, which means typically the business has lost almost hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? And we see more and more ML models being used by industries, right? Let's say in insurance, they use it for undertaking right, underwriting decision makings, right? Healthcare, fitness, a lot of places we see multiple use cases. So it is important for us to understand such drifts, understand such biases, and be able to identify, right? So so that we can help customers make sure the outcome from the ML models doesn't potentially create any business loss, right? That's where the data validation for advanced analytics comes into play, right? So let's move on to the last use case that we have. So now that we have looked at data warehouse intelligence built on top of that, the other aspect that we see in general that's happening is typical infrastructure upgrade or a app upgrade, right? In such scenarios, the business users, right, they want to ensure that the business is not disrupted. They want to ensure that the pre and post scenario, right, everything is working fine, right? That is where we need to make sure that the reconciliation of the objects prior and post migration, post upgrade, right, is helping them give the business get confidence, right? So ensure that the records are intact, the number of reports that gets generated pre and post, we can do a quick reconciliation. So it could be let's say we get hundreds of PDF reports that gets generated. We could have same data sets in pre and post scenario, generate similar report or same, right? As a business user, they get confidence that this app migration or a app upgrade or an infrastructure upgrade, excuse me, has not resulted in any of the functionalities within the app or the functionality of the report or the numbers that are reported in these reports are not affected, right? So that's something that would be really helpful, right? And the other key aspect in such upgrades is making sure we have a thorough regression in terms of pre scenarios versus post scenarios, right? Post upgrade, ensuring that the system works with the old data and also the newer data post migration, right? So both of these aspects needs to be covered, right? So given the types of coverages that we spoke about, right, at length, how do we test it, right? The manual testers, if you look at it, they test these manually, right? So when they test these things manually, they have specific challenges around this, right? Because as we saw, each of these use cases has multiple sources, the heterogeneous sources, right, through which they consume data. So testing of this is largely manual. They write SQL queries. They work with large data sets. When they run queries, it runs for a longer period of time. And with a lot of these newer implementations, digital transformations, what we see is from the batch processing, we are coming to near real-time data ingestion or a real-time data ingestion, right? So which means we need to be able to test in real time the data getting ingested and the models we spoke about it earlier. All of these have to be done manually, right? So when we do manually, we don't have the time at some instances to completely do the testing for 100% data. So some of the enterprises rely on sample-based testing approaches, where a smaller subset of records is taken and then it is being used for testing and certification. Based on that, it gets promoted into production. But then they later identify something in production, right, as break because of a specific data set which was not presented in the earlier volume with which they tested. So how do we address this, right? The key aspect to address these challenges is bringing in automation, right? So when we talk about automation, Is it doable? Yes, it is doable. There are enterprises for which we have implemented this framework using Python. We started with Python, and in the last 3-4 years, the platform has evolved, and from a command line interface, it has become a web-based platform through which, from a simple framework, it has evolved into a platform with which we were able to do heterogeneous data comparisons, right? And we can do away with the sample-based execution. The framework gives the ability to do 100% data comparison, right? So it's our framework that is built on to ensure that we have data quality, data completeness, data integrity, and data consistency. So as part of this framework, the users can create test cases, right, with which they can do validation of two different data sets. As I said earlier, it helps you do heterogeneous data comparisons, and post comparison we will be able to get detailed metrics in terms of number of orphan records, number of duplicates. At a column level, do we have mismatches? What are those actual mismatches? At a row level, what are the mismatches? How many records are mismatching? The actual value of these mismatches. It will be able to give all of these information, right? So with this framework, we can do 100% data quality checks, right? We can do data quality checks, we can do data accuracy checks. Cell by cell comparison can be performed, right? Rather than a sample based approach, we get 100% data comparison, and the entire testing of this any of the data tables with high volume, we see a drastic improvement, right? So 60%, 65%, 70% of the your execution timeline gets reduced because of using such a framework, right? So we see Python, Scala, Spark. There are multiple data ingestion frameworks which we can develop such a platform to validate data between heterogeneous data sources. Right. So with this, what I wanted to do was show a quick demo, right? In the interest of time, I have created a canned demo. So let me play it for you. So we are logging into the platform like a typical platforms, right? Like any of the platforms, we have ability to create configuration. All these are one-time activities, right? So we can configure files, we can configure email systems. If there are multiple databases, we can configure all of them, right? We could do that. And if there are files which we have to use, we could do that. And the users have the ability to add files, they have the ability to connect to data sources, right? Once all of these are one-time configurations that they do, right? Once they have created these configurations, they build test cases, right? And when they build test cases, it's a four-step process where they specify the type of mapping which has to be compared, and it would have source and target data. Once the source data and the target data is mapped, they get the ability to uh, uh, connect and specify the business rules. They can specify if they have to do with simple data, they can do that, or if they want sample data, or if they want transformational data. It is not as is data. We can do comparison with data with transformations also, right? Once the data gets populated, metadata gets populated the moment you select a file or a table, right? And then the user will have to specify the key with which they can uniquely identify a row, and then they can do a comparison, right? And when they want to do a comparison, they can specify the columns with which it needs to be compared, and if they don't want certain columns to be compared, they can do that also. And they can create business rules, they can apply filters, right? And then the key step is to tell what type of validations we want to perform, right? We want to do a complete count check, orphan records that are residing in source which have not made it, and as part of the transformation process, if there are duplicates created, they can check that. And if there are mismatches, we want to do that, it can do that, right? And once these test cases are created, they can be executed, and once the execution is completed, we will be able to do a drill down, right? whether the test cases has passed, failed. If it is failed, what is a failure, which attribute has failure, the number of failures it has. We will be able to check all of these aspects, right? And the other features are it can have test suite. It can be integrated into your CI/CD platform. The results could be automatically emailed. It maintains version history, and the results can be exported into text file, JSON, right? So that if there is a downstream or a framework on top of this, you want to do analysis, you could do that with the help of these reports. If it has to be shared with the development team for further retrospective, it could be done also, right? So that's the advantage of the framework and the capabilities that it has, right? And it continues to evolve, right? There are newer data sets which are coming up, and we continue to evolve. This is an evolving platform that we use for automating the data assurance, right? Because as I said in the beginning, the key thing for a specific implementation, right? In such an implementation is for the business users to make decisions with confidence, right? For them to give confidence, testing the 100% data is the way forward, and doing it in an automated way is key to it, right? Which brings in agility, right? Which means we can do faster time to market, right? Enable the business users to run these tests as regression. The same can be expanded to a post-production scenario, and they could continue to use that for post-production scenarios as well, right? So we looked at the demo, and this is predominantly what I wanted to cover in today's session. And Abhi, if there are some specific questions, we can take it now.
Thank you, Arun. That was very insightful. Yeah, we have a few questions that have come in. I think we'll have time to take 2 or 3 questions. Let me start with the first one, Arun. I think it's a question about the demo. Are you exporting data from the table and storing it into a temporary table? That's the question.
No, the framework doesn't import the table into dump into temp tables. It processes the data in memory.
All right. Okay. So the next question, Arun, it is, with real-time data ingestion processing capabilities emerging, will the testing approach change?
Yes, I would say there are multiple things, right? With the real-time data ingestion, one, the advantage for us is we don't deal with high volume data, right? But then there is a time series of data that is coming in, but the overall approach could still be the same, but then the way in which we need to test, right? With the real-time ingestion, there could be a lot of streaming platforms which we need to integrate. For an example, we are a partner with Stream, which is a real-time data ingestion framework, right? We work a lot of projects, we work with that. So we do integrate our frameworks with the solutions like Stream to have validation on top of the real-time data ingestion frameworks also.
All right, noted. I think we have time for one last question, Arun. After that, we'll, I think, respond to the questions via email. The third question that we have is, do you have some benchmark numbers on the overall performance of the framework?
Yeah. See, we do have benchmark numbers, right, on the framework and its capability, but it is important to note any such framework, right, there is a lot of dependency because we are talking about data, right, and we are talking about on-premise data, we are talking about data in cloud, which means we are talking about network, right, and when we talk about doing comparison, the network latency, the compute capability that we have on the servers, the number of processes that are concurrently running on the database, all these attribute to the performance numbers, okay? So it could have a positive or a negative influence based on the type of usage that is there at that moment. But yeah, keeping all those parameters aside, we do have benchmark numbers. For example, we ran a 100 million data set with 50 columns roughly. Cell by cell, if I have to validate, that is 5 billion cells of data, right? in our environment, we created 1 million rows of mismatches, orphan records, 5 attributes in which we had introduced mismatches, and duplicate records, 50K duplicate records. Because such frameworks, when they have all of these kind of failures, to capture them and then report, right, which is the benefit of the automation framework, right? And that is where it takes time, right? So when we created such a data set and we tested with a 3 node cluster, we were able to complete this complete execution reporting all together in 53 minutes, less than an hour, right? We are talking about 5 by 5 billion cell individual validation and then reporting, right? That's the benchmark number that we have seen with the framework.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much, Arun. As we wrap up this webinar, remember that data assurance is the secret sauce for making data-driven decisions in the fast-paced world of 2024 and beyond. We've delved into cloud migration, evolving data architectures, automation, and our IDAF framework. Our gratitude goes out to Arunachalam for sharing his insights. To our esteemed audience, you now possess the tools and knowledge needed to excel in data assurance. The road to data driven success is wide open. Thank you for being a part of this journey. Stay informed, stay ahead, and make confident data driven decisions. Until next time. If you have any specific or urgent inquiries or require any further assistance, please reach out to us. We'll send out an email shortly with all contact details. Thank you once again for joining us today. On behalf of the entire team at Indium and Arun, we wish you all the best in your data assurance endeavors. Have a great day.